should we wait a bit? You're not.
I think we could start. This is your last session. If people haven't joined, they won't join.
Yeah.
No, they will join. I think it's like
Slowly.
after lunch, they are all entering slowly into the fray. After this, we have
cultural program, right?
Yeah,
right. I forgot.
Right. Yeah.
So that's online too. That's why I was asking, where is it situated?
So the first time when we had the conference, which was physical in Homi Bhabha Center, it coincided with Savitribai Phule's birth date.
Oh,
That's when we held it. And then there was a play on her life and so on as part of the events. Somehow I think we've kind of kept it. The first time we did it online, some of us were coerced to make to be part of the cultural program. But I think now no coercion is needed. So,
it's a good way to end, actually.
Yeah. Okay, so welcome everybody to the sort of last academic session of the conference. We have a panel discussion, and the panel discussion is about the various changes to the education landscape that have already happened and are continuing to happen, particularly because of many different policies which have come into play. And there's a slight change in the program. Two of our panelists, John Binze and Mukund Madhav Mishra couldn't join us because of personal issues. They had to drop out. And so I have the sole charge of moderating this discussion, and we've elevated Amber to a panelist. And in any case, he would have told you much of what he wanted to say, even as a moderator. But now we'll give him exclusive time and hear from him. I'm going to, so the first speaker for us will be Saumen, and then Farida, and then Amber. And before each of them speak, I will actually introduce them then, read a little bit or tell you a little bit about them. So let me get started. First, I'll tell you about Saumen. Saumen joined the Zakir Hussain Center for Educational Studies, School of Social Sciences, JNU in 2004, and has been a professor since 2010. He worked in the National Institute of Public Finance and Policy during the period 1995 to 2004. His research areas include economics of education, focusing particularly on policy making in higher education, public finance, specializing in the areas of tax evasion and black economy. His major publications are Education and Economics, Disciplinary Evolution and Policy Discourse. It's published by Oxford University Press. And then Macroeconomics of Black Economy 2018 by Orient Black Swan. Changing Higher Education in India, and I think this is particularly of relevance to all of us, co-edited with Professor Simon Marginson, University of Oxford, and Professor N.V. Varghese, who's the Vice Chancellor of NIPA. It's been published by Bloomsbury, London, and that's his most recent book. And of course, he's been involved in writing about education policy, and has also been involved in many national and international projects, including on funding of higher education, social science research, policy making, and so on. So, I very happy to invite Saumen, and he's going to give us an overall picture of how these policy changes have come about. So, to you.
So thank you, Geetha, and thank you, Amber, for giving me the opportunity to share my understanding with you. And Ramanujumji, of course, is at the helm of affairs. Thank you very much. I don't know whether I can do justice to NEP, given my understanding and the time constraint, and it's an unfolding. So I will only make an attempt to share my understanding, so that your expectations remain somewhat limited and muted from my presentations. Okay, I mean,
Saumen,
I will.
you want to go into full screen?
Yeah.
That's your.
I will.
The bottom icon.
Yeah. This is fine, right?
Yeah, thank you.
In order to explain the very logic of higher education reform, I will spend a couple of sentences. I mean, see, the looking the education system is that, we the teachers are supposed to be intrinsically motivated and we are trustworthy. We give our best and we should have the freedom to teach and to do research. And we should be adequately supported by the financially and financial resources as well as physical infrastructure. But increasingly, world over, what has been found that the education system is failing to deliver, and at the same time, education system has to respond to the emerging challenges that we are faced with. So, the approach of the policymakers has been that we have ceased to be trustworthy, and therefore the accountability mechanism has to be so designed that it has to be shifted from our own conscience to the state regulation and the market. And increasingly, world over, we see that the focus is on student. It should be student-centric. And possibly job market and the cost recovery are the two major objectives of education. Right? So why market-based reform? And let me admit, in the very beginning, my approach to understand NEP is a market-based reform, but the education market cannot typically be a typical chocolate market or a market for cell phone. So we have to remember. So why market? Because there are two major fundamental dimensions of market that the policymakers stand to gain and they expect to gain. One is that we have the freedom to choose. We are given many options to choose from, both for the students as well as for the educational institution, and how to energize the sector, how to rejuvenate the sector. I think the policymakers believe that the competition is one way of doing it. Right. So I should be very brief. Now, this is, we have talked about what does NEP seek to achieve: transformation, self-formation, to encourage critical thinking, and therefore to foster the publicness of higher education. Now, the policy prescriptions actually follow from the diagnosis. It's a typical blood report leading to the prescription written by the doctor. Now, so it is important to see that how the challenges that Indian education and particularly higher education were faced with. The draft of the national education policy said that there are too many institutions, they're very small, and they're of substandard quality, leading to suboptimal utilization of the resources, human, financial, and physical. We, the teachers and the students, are not vibrant enough. There's a lack of enthusiasm among the teachers and students. And the regulation has failed because too much of micromanagement has really suffocated the teachers and the students to be innovative and imaginative. And then the faculty did indulge in unethical practices, and promotion is largely based on seniority, proliferation of the fake journals, and inspectorial regime did not deliver. And infrastructure, of course, is lacking because vacant faculty position and all, and vocational training, that's important, that only 19 to 24 age groups, India had only 5% compared to 52% in the States, United States of America, and 75% in Germany. And of course, NEP said that commercialization is not something that which can lead to the delivery of quality education. So how the reform has been envisaged, these are the some elements, no means they're exhaustive. First is the gross enrollment rate, and this is very crucial. From the existing 27, 28%, we're going to raise it to 50% by 2035. But what is important here to remember that 50% of the students enrolled in higher education should have exposure to vocational education by 2025. It's a big, big jump. So how do you rejuvenate? Rejuvenate the system by giving autonomy to the teachers and the institutions and promote multidisciplinarity in the courses. All these things you know, I'm just recapitulating for most of you. And higher education system should evolve as a multidisciplinary research institution over time. And there is a need to respond to the job market. The employability is a matter of concern. And so therefore there is a push towards vocationalization. What is important here, and that is very, very crucial for us to understand, is the flexible learning. The student should have the option to exercise flexibility, right, in terms of the courses that they can choose from across the institution and possibly over a period of time, both within the country and across the border. Phase out the affiliated colleges, because the colleges should no longer remain affiliated. They should be autonomous. Let them offer multidisciplinary courses and evolve, and internationalize the Indian higher education. There is a very clear thrust on online education. I mean, it was 2020, immediately after the NEP was announced, that the UGC announcement gave a very clear indication that we should urge the students to go for the courses being offered on the Saumen platform. This open distance learning is something that the NEP is giving emphasis. And if you look at the budget also, the budgetary allocation does the same thing. So you have to tap the potential of ICT. Leadership has to be very strong and assertive, right? So the draft of the National Education Policy says that, okay, the VC should be, the academic credential should be very, very high. But what is more important, possibly the leaders should be strong and assertive. And public funding of higher education should be raised to 6% of GDP. This is the overall approach. But now let us look at why I'm saying let us look at the higher education reform as a market-based reform, and what are the elements of NEP which are supposed to usher in the major transformation in the sector. So we'll be looking at the students, the institutions, and the interface between the student and the institution, and other than the task of knowledge generation. Now, what are the major elements of NEP? How we can connect the dots, how we can make sense of the entire approach to NEP. This is my take on the matter. Now, generally the policymakers think about two kinds of efficiency. One is the efficiency that we need to achieve at the institutional level. Through governance reform, we can achieve it. And second is at the market level. That means the courses being offered and courses being opted for by the students. To the extent feasible, there should be a match between the two. The match can never be possible, not desirable either. But let us converge to a situation where the choice of the courses would roughly correspond to the courses that the institutions offer. Now, there are four major regulatory bodies, the four pillars, you can say. And at the top of the regulatory structure is the Higher Education Commission of India, which will be supported by the four major institutions. I'm not going into the details of it. I'm just telling you there National Higher Education Regulatory Council, National Accreditation Council in place of the NAC, existing NAC, Higher Education Grants Council, possibly in place of the UGC, and then you have got the General Education Council. Now, this market has to be regulated at the national level. And the distinction between the public and the private and the state and the center and the domestic and the international, these distinctions, the walls should be dismantled. I mean, that is the very purpose, that you develop a market at the international level without making any distinction between all these three categories: national, international, public, private, state, and the center. But the market has to be regulated, as I said. It cannot be a full-fledged market. So on the student side, the major policy changes being mooted, and already, the government has taken it very seriously, is to set up the academic bank of credit. Now, if the students are being allowed to choose the courses across the institution, right, then, and over a period of time, they can choose as per their convenience, naturally, there has to be an account in a bank, in a portal, where they can accumulate the credit, they can earn the credit, to put it, more logically, they can earn the credit and put it. So as and when they complete the credit earned, they can ask for it. Now they're completely disassociated from the institution. Right? I mean, earlier we had the CBCS, but this is a major push to the system. So this is from the student side, and from the producer side, from the institution side, we have the freedom to collaborate, freedom to offer courses, the teacher autonomy, institutional autonomy, they are not similar. but they're different, but I will not get into this. An institutional development plan. What is good about institutional development plan? As per what has been uploaded in the website, then the draft, is that the student, teacher, and the non-teaching staff should sit together and evolve a plan, imagine the future of the respective institutions, and collectively make a plan, and then ask for the resources from possibly the HEGs. It's called institutional development plan. So there is an attempt to nurture or foster collegiality within the institution by bringing all the stakeholders, the non-teaching staff, student, and the teachers together. This is as far as the market is concerned, but within the institution, as I said, governance reform is a must, because the NEP expressed discontentment about the suboptimal functioning of the institution. So one is that IDP, I've already said. The second is the leadership, and third is the incentivization of the teachers. So again and again, the government is willing to argue that those who are really performing very well, I mean, the excellent performance should be rewarded by the government. So the existing pay commission does not allow for incentivization, and that therefore there has to be a fast track system so that the high performing faculty can climb up the ladder of the careers the faster. There are more about institutional governance. One is that there's a focus on the financial probity, transparency, and good governance. They said that if the balance sheet of the annual accounts, financial accounts of the institutions are uploaded, then a lot of malpractices could be curtailed at the very institutional level. The transparency can lead to and curtailment of the malpractices. So this is the major focus about the governance. And then, since the regulatory practices were not really complied with, and they stifle the teachers, as rightly said in the draft of the national policy. So the NEP is saying that let there be regulation. Regulation is a must, let me admit. But regulation should be light but tight. It should be light but tight in the sense that compliance has to be ensured. So what are the major issues of concern? I will go to the regulatory body. I mean, if the time permits, I've already taken 10-15 minutes, I suppose. The major issues of concern are, the first, as I said, that the private sector has to be well regulated. Otherwise, again, commercialization would creep in, and then there will be a compromise with the quality. There are very, very good privately funded institutions, but not all of them are doing very well. So there is so the government has to ensure through regulatory intervention that the private sector does deliver, and they are not motivated by the profit maximization objective. Second thing is the funding has to be enhanced. And this is where I believe that it's very crucial component, because when you are trying to construct a market to foster competition, to get the best out of the teachers and the institutions, we should be on a level playing field. And the level playing field can only be ensured when the funding is adequate. The next point is about online education and flexible learning and what is called the micro-credential. So without online education, the market cannot be constructed. Unless you sever the link between the student and the teacher to the extent possible, you cannot construct the market. So online education, it's a major way, and the flexible learning, because the edtech companies are entering the fray, and therefore, and the Saumen platform courses are offering, they're offering courses which are, the institutions may not have the human resources to deliver those courses. So in a combination of the Saumen, the e-platform and the edtech companies, the students have got a huge opportunity to exercise their freedom to choose the courses. They think that these courses can make them employable. So responding to the emerging demand for skill in the job market through this online education and edtech companies and the Saumen platform are very, very important. The question is that, do the students have the necessary information to exercise the freedom? Do the students know what they're choosing is the best for them? Also, some international studies show that the students also have a tendency to maximize grade or marks. So, and then the consumerist tendency, which can be prevalent among the students, which are not good for the delivery of the quality. Multidisciplinarity in the 4-year UG program, I mean, of course, it is expanding the choice, but we have to make a distinction between multidisciplinarity and interdisciplinarity. And the 4th year UG program vis-a-vis 1-year master program, what are the pros and cons of it? This is something, is a big question for us. And then the budget for education, I think that the budget is unlikely to be raised. The next important question is that when we are focusing so much of online education and increased application of ICT, whether it would help us in achieving the learning outcome. Technology, what has happened because of the online education, earlier what we used to teach in the class is a service. The bell rings and we leave the class. And now what we deliver in the class is a potentially can be digitally, can be recorded and digitally stored, so it becomes a product. And therefore, the time and the space, both are being transcended when you're moving from the offline face-to-face teaching towards the online teaching. I mean, it's not that it's invaded the education market in a big way, but they're coming possibly. Now, there are indications world over that there's a tendency towards this, but there is also resistance for online education at the same time. The last couple of points, the increasingly differentiated market. The market is getting very, very differentiated, like state, center, public, private, good quality institutions of eminence, and the category 1 institutions and the rest of the institutions category 2 and 3. Now, when you have got a highly differentiated market, can we really deal with the merit and the students who are coming for the margin? Right? This is very, very, and internationalization of the market. Now, could I stop here, Geetha ji? I think I have taken time. Let me stop here.
If later when we have time in the discussion, you can bring up many of these points.
Thank you.
So thank you so much, Saumen. I mean, you've given us a very good overall picture of what NEP is proposing. Maybe we can have 1 or 2 quick comments if anybody wants to make it before we move ahead. But the primary discussion is going to be kept for later. Very quickly, if someone wants to make 1 or 2 points, we can take that. Okay. So maybe we'll come back to many of the. I have many things to ask of Saumen and comment on, but we'll wait for the discussion. I'm going to now quickly introduce Farida to all of you. Farida was a professor at the Department of Educational Studies, and she was also Dean Faculty of Education at Jamia Milia Islamia. She taught at the Central Institute of Education in Delhi University previously. Her PhD is in developmental psychology, and her research has focused on the social implications of education with special reference to mathematics education. She was in fact a member of the focus group on mathematics of NCF 2005. She has taught in the BLEd program at Delhi University as well as in the Masters of Elementary Education at TIS. Her recent publications have looked at psychology and its impact on education in India, mathematics and school reform in India, and she has recently written a piece on CUET, which I shall put the link of into the chat. And over to you, Farida.
Thanks, Geetha. Thank you, all of you, for asking me to be here. You know, the NEP has been discussed over these last many years because it has had many versions before it became an official document. But one of the critiques and against it was precisely that when it became an official document, there was very little discussion or, you know, a longish reflection on what came out as the final document. But be that as it may, policy change was long overdue. New policy was long overdue, considering our last policy became operational in 1992. But given that there was a long gap between the last policy and this one, and the fact that there has been enormous amounts of research in the education sector, a lot of problems that have surfaced, the long-standing crisis in education that we keep talking about in India. Very little of that has been incorporated into this document. One of the things about this document is that it comes, as if out of a vacuum. It has a very, it has diverse and very different terminologies that it takes on board. It deals with a whole lot of issues. It takes on, I think, a kind of international understanding of education at this moment, and what a lot of countries have been talking about, especially in the more advanced, in the West, the things that are important and the changes that have happened. One of them largely being the big turn to neoliberalism, which Saumen has just mentioned. And the policy document sort of comes out of that context, instead of a really grounded context of our country and the kind of problems that have majorly been talked about, which are affecting the system. None of that is mentioned. It's kind of vaguely touched upon, but there really isn't a background to this policy for what are the issues that are being dealt with, except the fact that the world has moved on and it's the 21st century and we need a new policy. So I think some of its problems come out of that, because it isn't contextually really grounded in our own context and the variety of things that is troubling our education system. I'm going to refer mostly to school education. That's my area, and that's the part of the policy I have been involved with, and I think has some serious problems. But nevertheless, I should also mention that, policies come and go. We've had some wonderful policies. I think, the earlier policies, if you look at the Radhakrishnan committee report, which was about universities, but it talks about education per se, and it has a wonderful understanding of what it should mean and what it should be doing. We have the Kothari Commission, which had immense potential for changing and the system, and also for bringing about some of the equity that we talk about, which was never actually realized. So policies come and go, and I know that, a policy document is really a promise. It doesn't give exact, it doesn't lay down every step of the way how things are going to be done, and that's not usually the brief. So I think one of the things to do is take that promise, and because this policy is about everything and nothing, and I say that very calculatedly, if you read this policy, it has contradictions galore. It'll talk about being totally inclusive and, free and flexible, and then it would have something which is quite contrary to that. It talks about giving infrastructure. One of the major promises it makes is of improving the infrastructure. How it is going to do that without any budgetary allocations or any commitments is difficult to understand. So given all of that, I think what one can do at the school level is pick on some of the things that it promises, or some of the areas that it leaves open to teachers who can be creative, who are committed, and who are willing to change things in the classroom. But even with that, there are limits actually, and it really has constraints which are going to be difficult to overcome. So one of the things, I'll just go through what actually as a policy, what it talks about, what are the main things that it talks about for schooling, what are the changes, because I think at the school level, there isn't the kind of interventions it's talking about as it would mean at the college and university level, because changing courses, changing the duration, etc., major changes that are bound to happen and are envisaged. At the school level, however, one of the main structural reorganizations is the, including preschool education. Now, again, that becomes very problematic. So it has this 5 + 3 + 3 + 4. So instead of starting at grade 1, you have what they call the foundational stage. So you have 3 years of Anganwadi and preschool and 2 years in primary school, grades 1 and 2. And so children up till about the age of 8 are included. Now, actually, this is a wonderful step that no one can argue with, to include preschool education as part of formal schooling and for the state to take responsibility. But at the same time, we know what a terrible state the Anganwadi system has been in. We know that the ECC that has been operational and programs that have been working quite well and needed improvement are actually being, funding on them is being squeezed. So how this is going to improve is not clear at all. And the policy doesn't tell you what is going to contribute to that change and to the great miracle of becoming a perfect system, which it envisages that there will be flexibility, teachers will be wonderfully trained, the Anganwadi workers will be trained, they will be paid well, they will be given autonomy. We know that none of that happens on the ground, and there is no provision in this policy for that to happen. So except for the fact, in the last 5 to 7 years, actually the spending on education has gone down. And although that 6% figure was never reached in the last 70 years, in the last few years, it is actually at a pathetic 3% maximum. Okay, at talking about Anganwadi and preschool children, where health is such an important issue, where children's well-being, especially children coming from the more backward sections, what they call socio-economically disadvantaged groups, they're the ones who need some of these schemes that were in operation. But interestingly, however, in the last, the scheme for, let me just look at I just wanted to give you what the cuts have been. The two major schemes in which there have been cuts in the last couple of years and reduction and slashing of funds. One is the midday meal, where the allocation came down from 1,300 crores to 700 something crores. And DS spending has come down equally. So, these are both programs which were meant to look after preschool children. These were schemes which were actually very beneficial to children. The funding is being cut, but we are told that children will be, more children will be included. So we don't know what's going to happen to the schemes that there are for those children. Similarly, the budget has been coming down for education. And the one area which Saumen mentioned as well is that children's online learning and digital learning is going to be, funding is going to be increased. So you already have a limited budget, and within that you want to take away funds from what children need, because the majority of our children actually need a lot of support in getting to schools. One of the major aims of this policy is to bring every child to school. Now, the children who are not in school need exactly these kinds of support systems to help them stay in school, to help them continue with schooling. If that is going to be not available, it's a little bit of a mystery of how suddenly children will all be coming to school, getting less incentives, less support to be there. So, these are the contradictions in this policy. And so that how they will be dealt with is not clear at all. And what is in fact worrying is that there is talk about, and the ways of compensating for some of these things is seen in volunteerism, in people within the community, that and charitable institutions and other institutions, non-governmental institutions, to help fill in these gaps. Now, that's actually very problematic, because the education, especially of those who can't afford to pay large sums for it, has to be the responsibility of the state. They cannot expect volunteers and non-governmental organizations to be fulfilling this role. And it's a large role which has to be actually, laid out clearly how it is going to be fulfilled, or where the funds are going to come from, where the support system is going to come from. So, it's a kind of document that promises a lot, which says a lot, but the substantive part is not clear at all, nor is it spelt out anywhere within the policy itself. There hasn't been much on the ground. Okay, one is the policy and what it says. The other thing of seeing the intentions is to see what has happened. The policy now it's already 2 years since it was out. It should be operational. Things are being put into place. But on any of these levels, no announcements have been made that would be reassuring. There is a proposal to start, one classroom, one channel, TV channels for educating children. There are proposals for a digital university. And this at the end of when we've just had 2 years of the pandemic. I'm sorry I couldn't attend that session yesterday. I'm sure it was really interesting, but I just couldn't. I had wanted very much to. But we know we have studies which were done during this time, which show that children, especially from marginalized and underprivileged backgrounds, deprived, backgrounds, have suffered immensely during this time. They have not been able to be part of the system. They have lost out on learning, and it is going to take a lot of time and effort. So instead of making provisions for that kind of effort to happen, to have some support systems on the ground which can cater to children who don't have phones at home, who don't have computers, who are not so easily able to plug into, electronic digits and media, and nor do they have a support system in the way of parents and educated adults who can help them with their studies, with literacy, numeracy, as in school education, that seems to be a big part of it. So where is it going to come from? We have to ask those questions. And I think teachers, most of all, should be very aware of this. For math teachers, I'm going to end quickly. I think there are some things that they keep talking about, the policy keeps talking about, is this flexibility of giving children a learning environment which is joyful and where they are involved, where they have a freedom, they are not being made to rote learn, they can move from areas of interest one to the other. And I think teachers should use that. I mean, the policy cannot dictate in a sense how that's going to happen in the classroom. But what one can do within a document like this that comes out is to actually claim that. And as teachers, make the establishment responsible for those things, that if you're promising us infrastructure, we need to have it. If you're promising classrooms of a certain kind, we need to have it. If you're saying that mathematics is an important part of early learning and all children must learn mathematics well and good mathematics, give us the means to do that. Give us the opportunities, give us the infrastructure, and give us the independence and freedom to be able to deal with that. But at the same time, you have, and that is actually quite problematic within a school context, is to look at, and this has been happening, in a lot of in America, it's happening and it hasn't been good at all, is this whole focus on outputs instead of input. So what is going to be looked at is assessments and how well children are doing, without looking at what are you giving to them, what kind of school is a child going to, and why is the output less or more, instead of looking at what kinds of changes are happening within a system given limited resources. If we are just going to compare children on the basis of outputs and teachers on the basis of outputs, it doesn't bode well at all. And at the end of it, I'll just end with that. You have something you have introduced like the QET, which is what was happening all the time, because what do children study to is entrance examinations. We know that for years, children in class 11, 12 who can afford it are in tutorial classes preparing for entrances to medical schools, to engineering schools, etc. And what you claim to be what you are teaching them, if those are going to be in place at any rate and the competition is going to be at that level, then I don't know how you are expecting children to have a good all-round holistic education where they are actually, realizing potential, becoming better human beings. All of that is not spelled out. So we need to look at that and, look for ways of doing that within classrooms. And in fact, asking for that at a larger level, that if this is what the end trajectory is going to be, then how do we bring in all of the goals that we are putting up here? So thanks, Geetha. I think I'll end there.
Thank you, Farida. Again, any quick comments? Otherwise, we will, I'm going to now say a few words about Amber. Amber is a professor of mathematics at the Shiv Nadar Institution of Eminence in UP. Prior to this, he was a professor with the Mathematical Sciences Foundation, New Delhi, and he's taught in St. Stephen's College for many years. He did
we are not able to.
Oh, have I not? You're not able to hear me?
Now it's okay.
Yeah.
Now it's okay? Yeah. So
I was able to hear.
We were hearing you.
Oh, sorry.
So it's only
Sorry.
Yeah, okay, sorry. Yeah, so Amber did his master's in mathematics from IIT Kanpur and a PhD from University of California, Berkeley. His research interests are in representation theory and mathematical finance. And for many, many years, he's been very interested in how mathematics education at school and college level can be made more interesting and fulfilling. And he has contributed to the curricula and activities of many universities as well as national bodies like NCERT. And I must mention that he's a fantastic photographer of butterflies and of course birds as well. So over to you, Amber.
Okay, thank you. I'll just share my screen. Can you see the?
Yeah.
Yeah, we can see.
Okay, great. Yeah, actually, before I begin my own presentation, let me say something about something that Farida said about online education, what it did during the pandemic. And I just want to say that in yesterday's session, this was exactly one of the things that many of us speakers talked about. The impact of online education on all students, but especially on the students that they had who were from rural areas, or they did not have access to devices, or there was just one phone in the entire family. So which kid gets to attend classes, all sorts of issues. And an interesting survey that one of the panelists, Madhav, had of her students about their loss of confidence, where the students fell into two very clear classes. One class that was well equipped and actually liked not having to go to college and felt that they did well in the online mode, and another class which completely suffered during the thing. So there was a graph with two peaks, one for the people who had the resources and one for the people who did not. And this is the world that NEP would like, to make a regular world of education. So that is definitely something very disturbing for us. Now, we had a panel 2 years ago in the MTA annual conference when NEP had just come out. And so at that point, we had read the policy and we were speculating on what the impact would be. And so this time we are looking at what has actually happened since then over 2 years. And speculation continues because only a small part of NEP has been explicitly implemented. So we still have to see what will happen with the other parts of it. One thing I think I would like to do is maybe take some aspects of NEP, say a little bit about, where are they coming from, in the sense, what is the prior history of such things. One of the things that NEP talks about a lot is multidisciplinarity, and this continues to happen in all the documents, that are associated with NEP and have come out later, like the recent draft 4-year undergraduate program. So that is something it prizes very highly. But again, it's of course not a new idea. And back in 2001, we had the UGC model curriculum for different subjects, and including one for mathematics. This was also my first year as a college teacher, coincidentally. So when I became a college teacher, the latest model that was being proposed at the time spoke about multidisciplinarity, about the relationship of different disciplines with each other, of what's happening with college, with the requirements of the job market, and so forth. So all this was already talked about earlier, and it also talked about, specifically about mathematics, about what is the role of mathematics and what could be the benefits of a thorough education in mathematics. And this was a document that was put together by faculty from from a variety of institutions, colleges, universities, research institutes, and so forth. Okay. Now, of course, this was a policy and there was a model curriculum. Some sort of implementation happened in different places, but the government continued to think about what they want university education to be. And the next maybe major step comes in 2015 with UGC's choice-based credit system, which I think, as has been remarked by the earlier speaker, they just make statements, very sweeping statements, without bothering to back up any of them. And this was one of them, where the UGC claimed that the majority of Indian higher education institutes have been following a system which obstructs flexibility. As if there is no knowledge of previous policies and what they had actually said. And let's take a look at the CBCS briefly before we go on to NEP, because there is an element of continuity as well as a break. Okay. So in the CBCS documents, they make certain claims and promises. They claim that the new system will shift from being teacher-centric to student-centric. This was a great mystery to me at the time. I mean, I can kind of understand what is student-centric education, but I had no idea what they meant by calling the existing system as teacher-centric. Saumen's comments today finally gave me some understanding of what the government thinks is a teacher-centric system. A system where teachers have academic freedom and are considered to be responsible agents to whom you can trust the education of the students. Well, then other things, it was a credit-based system. It said, there are some credit requirements, but you can do more. There are no restrictions, etc. So certain promises were made that there would be courses of different types, and you would be able to choose between them. Education would be broad-based. Global standards have become a big deal somehow. One doesn't know what they mean, but that is what one has to attain. And this idea that flexibility for students to study at different times in their lives and at different institutions. Again, it's curious that recently there is less emphasis on improving what's happening within an institution, and more that if you are not happy where you are, you can shift to somewhere else. Okay, so flexibility in moving between institutions is supposed to be a cure for many of our problems. So NEP takes on all this, and then it adds a few more things to it. Okay. And basically what it adds to this is an emphasis on online education. So it says earlier, the freedom to teach online was restricted. You had to get special permission. You had to show that you were capable in some sense. But now every institution would have this option to run open distance learning. In fact, it is not that we have an option. We get periodic reminders now from UGC that we must for students to take a certain number of courses in the online mode. Okay. And this has become the preferred way of increasing access to education. These things, I think some of these have been mentioned before, the academic bank of credit and so on, and other developments, Swayam, a greater emphasis on Swayam courses, etc. So to me, what this is giving us is a retreat of the government from, promising more facilities or, trying to further improve the existing institutions, instead saying that here is a substitute. Right? So it would be one thing if this was meant as an additional supplement to regular classroom education, that would continue to be nurtured as it should be. And here is something supplementary that you have that some can benefit from. But I think in reality, what we are seeing is that this has become the preferred mode of expansion and even maybe of regular education. This is, and if we say what does NEP have to say about mathematics, then this is the one paragraph that is specifically devoted to mathematics in NEP. Mathematics word occurs several times, but then along with other disciplines, saying something must happen for everyone, so it must happen for mathematics as well. But here is the one place where it talks specifically about mathematics. It recognizes that mathematics and mathematical thinking will be important for India's future and India's leadership role in numerous upcoming fields. These are the standard ones that I talked about nowadays: artificial intelligence, machine learning, data science. Will be given increased emphasis throughout the school years. Again, I mean, it is not that mathematics does not receive emphasis through the school years. I mean, it's an important subject. Students spend a lot of time and stress on it. You could talk about giving more resources, is not quite what the NEP is saying. Okay. Including regular use of puzzles and games. Again, it's not as if this is not already part of, what say even the national curriculum framework and CRTs has prescribed or has recommended. So again, not very much that is new. And as far as the role view of mathematics goes, I think the 2001 document had a more universal and progressive description of mathematics and its importance than this one, which relegates it more to something that's useful for machine learning. Okay. But let's look at what has happened, at a couple of things that have happened recently that are coming out of the NEP. So one of the things that happened this year was that the UGC released a draft curriculum for a 4-year undergraduate program, meaning that 4 years is the maximum you can spend and get the highest level of degree if you do that. But you could leave early after 1 year or 2 years or 3 years and get corresponding certification for that. So it was released on March 17 of the year. And I believe the original intent was that in this academic year, this would be implemented. Over the summer, institutions would work on their versions of this draft curriculum and would float them this academic year. And that is why, maybe one of the reasons why very little time was given to people to respond. It was released on March 17. You had to give any feedback by April 4, and you had to restrict your feedback to 500 words. It was online, so once they said 500 words, there was no way past it. Okay. Now, there was immediate criticism of this document on various grounds. One was that it represented a dilution of previous standards. I'll show another slide as to why this particular accusation was there, that it did not account for the realities of education in India, that it was internally inconsistent, and that it created a new hierarchy of inferior and superior degrees. Well, NEP itself does that, but then this made it much more explicit. Significant amongst the protests was also that significant portions of this draft curriculum or national policy were shown to be directly copied from websites of two US universities. Anyway, so because of this criticism and these charges of plagiarism and so on, I think UGC had to take a step back. So they did not insist on applying it this year. They said that the committee would take these things on board, and next year in 2023 they would release a final version of this.
Has Amber lost connection?
Yeah, I can't hear. So
Yeah, I thought it was from my side first, but I think he'll
he's
connect
frozen.
back.
Yeah,
Yeah, he'll connect back as soon as he can. We'll just wait a minute or so for Amber to join back.
Okay, so about that, my connection went. So anyway, I think it's good
Good
that
example.
Of digital learning.
Let me just share my screen again. Okay, so what this did was it said that in the first 3 semesters, everyone will basically do the same basic courses. There'll be a basket of these and you will select, but these would really be basic courses so that anyone with any background could do them. Okay. And the major portion was the so-called introductory courses, where every student, no matter what their background in +2, would take courses from sciences, from social sciences, and from humanities. And at the end of these 3 semesters, you would be allocated your major. So you would not take admission in a particular major to begin with. You would not, for instance, be admitted to mathematics program. You would just be admitted to the undergraduate program. After 3 semesters, you would get a chance to apply for a mathematics major. That selection would depend on how you did during those first 3 semesters, in which you would maybe do one maths course of a very basic level. So this is certainly a strange situation, because when you take admission in a university, you do it without any idea. It's one thing to say that you can leave things open if you like. It's another to say that you have no opportunity to fix your major at all. And again, if we were a country where you had not specialized in school, then it would be one thing. But when you have already chosen to specialize in school, then undoing it by force at the university level is a grave inconsistency. And it's just wasting a lot of what you have done in school. Okay. Then after this, in semesters 4 to 6, you would complete your major along with a significant portion of 2 minors. And at the end of 3 years, then having done all this, you could graduate with a plain bachelor's degree. Now, if for 3 semesters you have not done nothing from your major, then in the remaining 3 semesters, you'd have to do the entire major, right? I mean, there's no other way out unless you dilute the major and make it a smaller amount than it used to be. So that was the charge of dilution. Okay, and when you look at the credits, I think that's a subsequent point. You will see what it was in detail. And some students would be allowed to stay for a 4th year. Those whose CGPA was above 7.5 could ask to stay for a 4th year and then complete a degree with a better name, which would be called either an honors degree or a research degree. And such students would be eligible for direct admission to PhD programs. So that was sort of the carrot. Okay. Now, in comparison to what we had before this, the CBCS honors degree had 148 credits in 3 years, out of which 108 were assigned to the major discipline. On the other hand, a student doing all 4 years of the draft FYUP program would complete 160 credits, of which 48 would be regular courses, 18 would be some elective courses and some credit for your undergraduate thesis. So anyway, at best 66 credits for your major earned in different ways compared to the 108 that you used to have in 3 years earlier. So again, so that is really the heart of saying that one is spending more time and doing much less under the new program. Okay, now, so this was happening at the same time. Universities have been under pressure to create new 4-year programs which are in line with the NEP, and many had in any way started work on their idea of what a 4-year program would be that was compatible with NEP in parallel with whatever UGC did here. And so, for instance, University of Delhi had created its own version a little before this draft came out. Okay, they released what they call a UG curriculum framework in January of 22, which had 176 credits over 4 years, in which 88 were for the majors. Even that was a watering down of the credits for the major from the earlier 3-year program, not as extreme as UGC's version, but still a fair amount. Okay, so just half of your credits would be from the major and half would be distributed over courses of various other types. You could do minors and you could leave after 1 year or 2 years or 3 years with whatever credits you had and get a certificate or a diploma or a bachelor's. Okay. So now the funny thing that happened was that places like Delhi University were creating these programs, their own versions. Then UGC came out with its, which was quite different in this case from Delhi universities. And then UGC kind of withdrew, went on the back foot and said, well, the final version is only going to come out next year. That left everybody hanging, because now what do you do this year? Do you start a 4-year program now? Then with what kind of curriculum do you start a 4-year program now? Because maybe in January or February of 23, UGC will come out with what it wants, and it may not be like what you were going to do. All right, so this is what Delhi University has done. This is all we know of the 4-year program in which a student will take admission in Delhi University. We only know the courses of the first semester. That is all that they have finalized and released. They did create a longer version, but that has not made it through all the approvals. It has not been made public. Only the first semester has been made public, because, as I said, when UGC releases its final version, then they will feel comfortable about deciding what happens in future years. Okay, so this is my last slide, but this little story is to, again, highlight that NEP is just full, as has been said by both the panelists, of contradictions. It is very difficult to look at NEP and say this is something positive you can take out of it, because whatever positive thing is given, with one hand, that and more is taken away by the other elsewhere in the document. And so they may promise you autonomy, but eventually it turns out that the autonomy that you have is the autonomy to set higher fees to run your institution because the government plans to cut its funding to you or to convert its grants to loans. That autonomy does not extend to choosing your own courses, because that the government is going to dictate through UGC or whatever replacement body it creates, and which is going to be very detailed. You are going to be told exactly how each credit will go and what kind of courses should fit. We no longer have model curricula that you can take as inspirations and then devise your own versions. You are given the exact curricula which you then have to follow. So this extends everywhere, and it's difficult to tell individuals what they can do with NEP, because in fact, as individual faculty members, we no longer have the rights to speak for how our discipline should be taught. You can speak, but there's nobody to listen to you. And there is no place where you can really make your voice heard in a formal way, where it will be recorded and it will be responded to. So, this is what I see about NEP and university education. What I see is that it is becoming a way for, in spite of every promise of autonomy, flexibility, and so on, it is in fact becoming a way for a central imposition of a uniform curriculum across the whole country. Right? And this is supported by the other activities, such as the institution of the CUET entrance exam, which again puts in place a central syllabus for everybody and puts in place a very narrow testing regime that inevitably everyone will have to teach to that. Right? You will not, your +2 or your class 8, 9, 10, 11, whatever broader view of mathematics or any other discipline one wanted to convey, it will become extremely difficult now, because the natural desire of a student will be to do well in these tests with only multiple choice questions. And I think we are already seeing the effects of these in some way, because education in the last 2 years has proceeded on the basis of such tests. We have already seen the impact of that in our classrooms as we resume teaching. And it's very unfortunate that this is what appears to be the new normal that we will have throughout. Let me stop here. Once I went full screen, I could no longer see the clock. I'm pretty sure I've exceeded my time by a large margin.
Not by a very large margin. It's okay.
Okay.
Yeah. So if you stop sharing the screen, then we will get the discussion going.
Sorry.
Ravi already has a comment. Maybe Ravi, would you like to unmute yourself and Ravi, are you there?
Yeah, I'm there. I don't have anything really more to say. Just a thought which crossed my mind. So
yeah, maybe you should just articulate it, just in case someone hasn't read the...
So I was saying that maybe one also has to develop. It was there in some of the comments made by the speakers, Amber and others, that look, there's a sort of way of going about making these policies, which seems quite arbitrary and maybe just designed to secure some kind of legitimacy. That to legitimacy on some public political platform or something like that. So maybe we need to have standards for processes which go into policy formation and designing policy. It's worth thinking about, what's a good way of going about this business. That's what I said in the comment.
Would anyone else like to comment, say something? Jam?
Can I?
Yeah. Yes,
yeah.
yes, sure.
I wanted to add something, especially because Dr. John Binze didn't show up. I mean, I thought, a couple of points that I know he would have spoken of, from St. Joseph's College, Bangalore. So, are you able to hear me? Yeah. Okay.
We can hear you.
So the Karnataka has started, announced an implementation of NEP last year. In fact, they were very proud to announce that they were the first state to implement NEP. And over the last year, there has been a tremendous a great deal of confusion that we have been hearing about in Karnataka from the colleges. And one problem has been that last year, suddenly they did away with the triple major system prevalent in Karnataka. In Karnataka, until last year, when you joined undergraduate in a college, you would join, let's say, math, physics, chemistry, or physics, chemistry, biology, or whatever. And colleges would offer packages and you would join. Now, as implementation of NEP, it was announced since July 2021 that this system was done away with. And they also announced multiple entry and exit points for students. And of course, now it has moved to 4-year long. And the other thing that they introduced was that you would leave at the end of 3 years with a certificate, or if you fulfill certain criteria, I think something like 75% overall. I don't know exactly. Then you would continue the 4th year, getting basically some kind of significant research component would be there, and you get an honors degree, which is what would be, because you will be eligible for direct PhD admission. So this is the sort of thing that is being implemented. I'm just summarizing. There's a lot of details that are important, and it's been quite chaotic in the process. This year, there has been a dramatic drop in enrollment in many departments. In fact, they're now talking about wanting to shut down a few departments. Even in reputed colleges like St. Joseph's University, Bangalore, they have math has dropped dramatically. In fact, really from 3 digits to somewhere, 120 to 30, 40 like that. It's true dramatic drop. And because there are no packages offered, right? So it's basically students choosing statistics or commerce or this. And colleges don't know how to offer the packages. They don't have enough faculty. So right now it's in a very chaotic state. And I don't know what clarity is going to emerge out of that. But probably we are seeing a preview of many of the things being discussed here in Karnataka. And, Bangalore colleges, in any case, they get large number of students. For them, it's not such a problem. But in Davanagere or, Tumakuru or, colleges are really having problems. And there are several, in fact, I heard of botany departments, zoology departments being shut down this year because of these things. So I don't even know if anybody is doing, we only heard, reports from individuals, especially mathematics professors talking about the problems, etc. I don't know if there is a systematic study of what has happened in Karnataka and in fact, I think whatever Saumen was talking about, if you want to see that market in action, especially in an ill-regulated market where information is also, highly asymmetric, right? You want to see the chaos at play, I think just come to Bangalore now. I think you will see plenty. And I hope there are somebody is doing a very systematic study and pointing out what the difficulties are. I'm reporting on what I've heard from individuals. That's not quite and as I said, I don't really know what's happening in rural Karnataka. We only hear some reports on these things. So, okay, I'll shut up. I just want to mention that.
Saumen, would you like to respond?
Yeah, not respond, but after listening to Amberji, I'm of the opinion, of course, I hinted in my presentation are we not going to spend less time on the major, given the rigor that we need to gain some mastery over the major, right? I mean, the drastic diminution in the credit assigned to the major in the name of multidisciplinarity. And I don't think that we should be ready to do our PhD after 4 years of undergraduate program. I mean, fine, we are promoting multidisciplinarity, but the cost is huge. As Amberji said, that there is some positive you give, and on the negatives you take it away. But so, are we really ready to do our PhD or 1 year of master degree? Can it compensate for the 4th year of UG program? This drastic reduction in the credit for major is not done. And as of course I said, and Ramanujamji said, that students will remain perplexed. I mean, they don't know what to do. Institutions would not know what to do. They suffer from information asymmetry, as we typically call it in economics. So basically, actually, there is a game plan. But the game plan is that there is not a gentle nudge. There is a policy thrust for the institution that if you can't offer the courses, you let them opt for the courses from the SIAM or the Diksha platform. EdTech will come, now foreign universities will come, open up the market to the international, and the differentiation that exists in the society will be further accentuated by differentiation in the market that we are going to construct. I mean, there are varieties of market, as of course these two presentations brought out, differences in the degrees. What do you mean by difference in the degree? So it is those who are underprivileged, they will be losing out from the system. I mean, learning is very difficult. There is no easy way to learn. If we all the time in the name of flexible learning, we are compromising, I don't know. Let me stop here. Yeah, Geetha ji. There's some basic hand.
Anshul had put up their hand.
Hi.
Yeah, go ahead, Anshul.
So I don't know. I mean, if it's a naive comment or not, but so I have recently done my master's in maths, and I've done my bachelor's from maths as well. So when I joined my bachelor's, there were a lot of people who joined bachelor's and masters, but then they were very like they were facing a lot of problems. Whereas if we see a system which is there in ICERS, in which students are taught multiple courses in first 2 years, and in the 3rd year, then they have to choose their major. It kind of gives them a buffer period where they can make up their mind if they want to choose a particular field or not. Or like there are many students who would think that they're interested in math, but then they might be interested in physics or biology, and same is with the other courses. So in some way, I do think it kind of provides them that opportunity.
Can I actually say something here, Anshul? It's true that yeah. So I am from Ambedkar University, Delhi, Dr. B.R. Ambedkar University, Delhi. And in fact, for us, we are a very new university. We started only in 2008, and our undergrad program started in 2010. So we had actually created a fairly nice system where we allowed lateral entry for students from other institutions if they could prove that they had done something equivalent to our first year. We also allowed students, we tried having students to join without declaring a major, but that did not work. They did not want to take admission to just an undergraduate program. So we allowed students to join any particular major they wanted, but we created a system whereby they could switch majors. So this kind of problem that you're saying about someone wanting to do mathematics initially and discovering after the first semester or the second semester that they weren't really keen on mathematics but wanted to switch their majors, we had the facility for that. Now, what worries me is the kind of prescription, because CBCS also turned out to be a prescription more than actually a choice-based credit system. There were not enough resources given to universities or to colleges to actually be able to offer a lot of choice to the students. It was extremely restricted. And so my worry really is that while NEP may say one thing, the manner in which it is actually going to get implemented, particularly when not enough resources will be given, and once UGC creates its FYUP, it will become prescriptive rather than autonomy of choice. In fact, every time there's been a regulation, whatever autonomy we had within our institution went down further. So we had a system of a dual major in which a person could have spent a 4th year and got a double degree if we had to scrap it when the 4-year program got scrapped by UGC. Now it's come back. I mean, I'm just bewildered because also, nobody mentioned this, but there was also a national higher education curriculum framework, which qualification framework, which came out. And each document itself had internal contradictions. So NEP has that. Similarly, the UGC FYUP had it, but there were also contradictions between these documents, right? I mean, so for example, NHEQF talked about the amount of credits you needed and you could exit after 1st year. And if you had a UGC FYUP in which you didn't even know what you were really doing in the 1st year, what certificate would you go out with, right? After the 1st year. 1st year of undergrad program certificate. It wouldn't even identify what major you would. So, I mean, the problem is that I'm not saying that our system did not require reform. It does require reform, but the manner in which the reform is coming is not, I don't know whether it's going to serve that purpose. And you also have to remember that ICERs and so on are catering to a very small number of students. The kind of policy changes that are being suggested are going to cover the entire university system, colleges, and all levels of colleges. Sorry, Amber. Yeah.
Yeah. So actually, this flexibility issue, whether it is flexibility in what courses you can do or flexibility to change your major. Flexibility demands that, you can make it happen if you have enough faculty in your institution, and you actually need a little bit of redundancy. Right? Flexibility means that from semester to semester, demand for some kind of courses may fluctuate. Right? And so now a program that really aims for flexibility has to make sure it has enough faculty in place so that, when the maximum demand is there, they can meet it. And when there is less, the institution should not mind that there are a few people who this semester have less teaching work. After all, there are many other things we demand from our teachers, not just that they teach courses. We demand now research with lots of administrative work, which has gone up. So you need a more broad-minded approach, a more generous approach to the faculty in order to make flexibility feasible. But we don't have that in our colleges. In our colleges, your teaching load is determined by the least load you might have in a year. That determines how many permanent faculty you can have. And when the load is higher, you then rely on ad hoc teachers, on guest teachers, and so forth, right? Okay, so now IITs and ICERs are special because the faculty hiring, the student numbers are kept small compared to the number of faculty that they have, and this is what makes flexibility possible. If we could all be in that situation, I think the number of problems would go down, but we are in a very opposite situation. At Delhi University College, for example, uh, has lots and lots of students per teacher. And in fact, one thing that has happened to our education system is that because of all these reforms and the lack of clarity as to what kind of teaching loads await in the future, institutions have not been able to hire, are not able to hire permanent faculty because you don't know what kind of teaching load awaits your faculty a few years down the line. And therefore, a very large number of faculty members are on short-term contracts. Right? That is not good for the quality of education. It is not good for the welfare of the academic community. Certainly, this is no way to persuade people to choose academia as a career.
Sorry, Saumen, you wanted to add something?
I just wanted to say that when you rightly said about the General Education Council, actually, you look at the target, 50% of the students by 2025 should have exposure to vocational education. That's a very, very tall order. Now, how is it going to be achieved? As you indicated, there will be general to vocational and vocational to general because of this qualification framework. So you are allowing the students to leave first year, second year, third year, fourth year. At the same time, you are also going to give them the option to join the vocational. And if they don't like vocational, let them come back to general stream. It is very mentioned that how does one achieve such a high number unless you give the students the option to quit, join the vocational and come back. So it is also in response to Sriranjani's question, the gig education model and skill. You see, the purpose of education is very clear. It may not come out very open and there are contradictions. The purpose of education, no matter what they say about self-formation, critical thinking, is to orient the graduates towards the job market. Right? So that is the purpose, that there's a vocationalization, the larger thrust on the skill, and then you internationalize. I mean, I think that is the purpose. So no matter what they say, but the thrust is there. And for this policy question, just one sentence, I know I'm taking time. You see, the policy is largely political, the process. Who are the members of the committee are political, are selected by the political masters, right? So, no, I mean, they might ask for the feedback and all. Ultimately, it is the ministry or the government take a decision. We might do research and provide the input, but lastly, it is very, very political. And they have got the vision. They may not come out very open, very explicit about it. We have to decipher it.
Well, I just wanted to add that it's not even workload which determines how many teachers you hire. It's a student-teacher ratio. So if you start a new program, they will not necessarily, so you might imagine that you need X number of teachers to teach that program. But the way they're deciding on how many teachers to allocate or to give to a particular public university has to do with how many students will you admit. At the undergrad level, there's a ratio which is applied. At the postgrad level, there's a ratio which is applied. So it's a very strange phenomenon. And of course, the UGC also clearly prescribes a minimum amount of teaching. And if you actually were to do that kind of direct teaching, then you can actually say goodbye to research. But all the universities, public universities, and even the ones like Delhi University, which didn't really follow it, I don't know what's happening in JNU, but our university wants to, so every faculty will do research, they will also do administration, they will also be teaching 3 full courses, postgraduate, PhD and undergrad at the same time. If you're a young assistant professor, that is what is ahead of you. I mean, I'm just wondering how anything is going to improve. I mean, what Saumen said in the beginning, which is that, the whole thing is that you don't trust teachers. You think that they are the latest term I heard mentioned by administrators is social loafing. Faculty social loafing karte hain. You know, I mean, so when you have administrators whose aim is, so if you think teachers are all terrible, how is it that suddenly they're going to become better and then the system will improve? I don't know. So it's a I don't know. I feel sometimes very disheartened to see, and I just feel somewhat happy that I'm in the last phases of my career, and that I may
Ask
not
those
have
of
to.
us who've retired, feel very happy to be out of the system.
No, I'm sorry to vent a bit, but the latest this is so the LG of Delhi does not have anything better to do but to circulate an official notice from his office to all the Delhi government universities saying that any vice chancellor or senior faculty who has a proposal to go for a foreign visit, it has to reach the LG's office via the Directorate of Higher Education at least 2 weeks before the proposal. And it says also include all the private and official visits you've done in the last 1 year.
Yeah, even can I?
What is this?
Can I make a comment?
Yeah, sure.
In Jammu and Kashmir, all college teachers since this year have to be assessed by the principal on 10 marks every month on how many outreach activities they've done. It's actually a bureaucratic form for all bureaucrats, how many grievances they have addressed, how many students they have met. And this form, so every month they have this 10 marks for college teachers that have to go in, and on the basis of that, they're going to be, and that's going to be part of their promotions, etc. as well. So it's actually ridiculous because they're also having a lot of, the teachers tell me that there have been NEP meetings, but you are being told before the meetings that you cannot criticize the NEP. So you come into a meeting, if you have something to add to it, you can say it, but if you don't, you cannot say it in the meeting. There are instructions that come to the teachers who will come to those meetings.
I think increasingly you are becoming ritualistic in higher education. And one reason why higher education has not been of very good quality in India is the ritualistic. We know how to fabricate, how to bypass the system, how to manufacture the kind of numbers that the administrators would desire from us. And therefore, we do everything on paper other than deep engagement with the teaching learning process. And that's why they need to understand what are the factors for learning outcome, not these bureaucratic processes. That doesn't help. We are fourth in the world, fourth, I think, after Germany, in terms of the number of papers that we are producing. Of course, we have got per capita production is very low, but in total number of papers and all, we are 2 lakh per year, Web of Science. But no matter, I mean, I'm not talking about all these journals. But I'm taking the very, very ritualistic, and bureaucracy should exercise and lesser control on us. They should trust us, otherwise the system is not going to deliver. If they think that they know what we should do, then let them do what they want to do eventually.
May I?
Yeah, sure.
I mean, just so that, since the association has many young people and we don't end on this note of despair, especially, I think I do want to point out that in India, a large number of initiatives, educational initiatives, and very positive things have happened despite policies and despite the governments. And, collegial enterprises have, like, for instance, I've seen the role that Eklavya played in school education, right? I mean, or in the formulation of the National Curriculum Framework 2005, of which many of us were part of. It was actually many outside the system initiatives that actually contributed a great deal over time. And I think even in the university education, many enterprises, insights have come, and many democratic initiatives have come, many things have come, and have all happened despite policies and governments doing their bit. So there is a dialogue that I was part of recently in Tamil Nadu, which is really a student initiative, which was talking about learning despite the NEP. And I liked the title very much. I mean, so I think I would like to, suggest that as collegiate initiatives, like association groups like that, I think we can also look for building strength in the system, building ways by which, whatever happens in Delhi and Chennai and Mumbai and all these places, things that can happen. And I do think that associations have a role to play of various kinds, many kinds of associations of students and teachers. And Saumen was just talking about a moment ago about the migration between the formal and the vocational and academic vocational. In fact, there is even an attempt to vocationalize the mainstream academic. In fact, all the talk of job readiness and all the things that are going on. Now, especially for the mathematics education community, there is something there to take up. What does that mean for mathematics education, right? What does it even mean? I mean, to even get some semantics out of that and articulate that, maybe, come up with ways by which, as I said, you can build strength from below. I do think that there are possibilities of that kind which we could be moving forward towards, and I think some dialogue is needed on that. So I would rather end on that note that it's certainly possible, and I think there's a lot of energy among people and commitment and dedication. That's not going down. So that's one of the very positive things
that I think
to look forward to. Yeah.
Despite the system, it's the teachers which are with dedication working.
Individuals as well, within very difficult government school systems who really take the initiative and are able to, find the little whatever places and spaces there where they can make a big difference. Yeah.
Exactly. Even as the spaces are shrinking, to lay claim to them and not let go, right?
No. So even within these circumstances, like what Farida had said, whatever loophole one is getting out of these contradictions, maybe in these documents, one is exploiting to keep the good aspects of what one already had. So we have, for example, in our university formulated an undergraduate UGCF plan, and after discussion very widely with all the faculty members, we're still a small university, so we could do that, and as a result, any implementation we do also involves everybody within the faculty system. So that's helped. Yeah.
Sorry.
Farida?
I was just wondering, is there any school teacher here who could tell us if the NEP has actually in any way making a difference in the school, or is there some, because I see a lot of college teachers and universities worked up about what's going on.
NCF is again being done, right? Jam, isn't that correct?
Yeah. Correct. But it has not been announced yet, and it's still under
I don't think the school teachers here should be able to respond.
I don't know if there's a direct impact right now, but I think the school teachers should really take on all the progressive terms this document is using and try and demand space for that.
Farida, one thing already came up this year in June from the Kendriya Vidyalaya schools. You were referring to the 5+3+3+4, right? And Kendriya Vidyalaya school started admission from class 1, and that is at the age of 6. So now many people came there and demanded admission, saying that according to NEP, you must be giving admission at the age of 5, right? They anyway do not have this integrated thing. So this created some chaos. And finally, Kendriya Vidyalaya system issued a letter saying that the current one will continue until next year when clarifications will be issued. So there you go. So I think a lot of it is like what Ravi mentioned on chat, because there is tremendous confusion. And So I think it's going to take, for impact on school system, it will certainly take some time to even get there, I think. So.
Because it's a document on the one hand, which kind of gives very broad guidelines and what should happen. On the other hand, it is being imposed in a way which is really not open and,
so,
you know.
I'm in Tamil Nadu, and Tamil Nadu formally rejected the NEP in the assembly and has formulated a committee to form the state's own education policy. I'm a member of that committee.
Kerala
and the
as
committee
well,
has
no?
been,
Kerala has already come
Kerala,
out with it.
yeah.
Sham, our former Vice Chancellor, Professor Sham Menon, was heading that commission. So they have
I'm saying,
come
but
out
in Tamil
with
Nadu, this committee has been having discussion, public hearings and meetings and so on. And there is tremendous discontent being voiced from many people, many sections of people, students, faculty, teachers. I don't know where it's going to go, but I'm saying that there are also other. But as Saumen pointed out, many of the problems are systemic. There is nepotism. There is so much that needs to be looked at. It's not only.
We can be happy that we are in a very complex system, which allows a lot of, inquiry and research. So I think with this, we should wrap up the session because we are soon going to move into the valedictory session, which will start at 5 o'clock. So I would invite all of you to join in and be with us for that. Thank you so much to the panelists, Saumen, Farida, and Amber. I think we've had a very interesting afternoon. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Conversation is to continue.
Yes, absolutely.